In this lesson, we are going to review a few examples of solving a quadratic equation by using the square root property, which I sometimes say method, and by completing the square method. So let's go ahead and see a few examples. This first example, it doesn't really tell us which of the methods to use. And that's the beauty about learning all the multiple methods that you can use in order to solve a quadratic. One of the methods that we have talked about before is to factor. So factoring the square root. Okay, and completing the square. So you're simply going to look at the problem and see, based on everything that you have learned, which one is the easiest method to use. In this case, because of this square right here, I will say let's use the square root method. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite my problem. I'm going to go ahead and add the 5 so I can isolate the parentheses. And now I need to cancel the radical, so I'm going to cancel it both sides. So then I am left with 3x. And remember, when you do the square, you're going to add. So plus or minus 5. Okay, now after I cancel the radical in the square, what's inside the parentheses comes out. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides. So then I have 3x equals 2 plus and minus square root of 5. Divide by 3. X equals 2 plus and minus square root of 5 over 3. And this is my answer. I can leave it to that. Since square root of 5 doesn't simplify anymore, and there's no directions where they want a decimal or not. So my answer, this is fine as an answer. See another example. So here, again, based on the methods that we have learned, which one is the easiest way? If you notice, you see this by itself, I would suggest let's just use the square root method again. You have the square there. There's no really parentheses, very little number of terms. So I add 3 to both sides. Then I divide by 6. P squared equals 5 over 6. And then again, I'm going to square root both sides just to cancel. P equals plus or minus the square root of 5 over 6. Because 5 over 6, if they're not perfect squares, I'm able to say that P equals square root of 5 over 6, comma, let me write that better. P equals square root of 5 over 6 and negative square root of 5 over 6. And those are your two answers. Let's see another example. Okay, so remember all the methods. We know how to factor. We know how to use the square root method. And we know how to complete the square, right? So based on the problem that we have, why don't we just check? Let's see if it's factorable. Factors of a that add to 6. Factors of a that add to 6. I think 2 and 4. So let's try factoring. Okay, so we're going to try by factoring. So m squared plus 4m plus 2m plus a equals 0. I'm using the AC method in order to factor this. You can definitely use another methods. It does not have to be just the AC. Okay, so then m plus 4, m plus 2 equals to 0. So m plus 4 equals to 0. M plus 2 equals to 0. Minus the 4 on both sides, so m equals negative 4. M equals negative 2. Now, what would it be if I would have tried completing the square? Let's see if do you want to try completing the square? or the square root method. The square root method here won't work, so we have to first do completing the square. So m squared plus 6m plus a equals 0. Wait, let me go ahead and write that in a different color. That way we don't get confused. And in this side, I'm going to use completing the square. We should get the same answer. Okay, I barely have any space. So I have m squared plus 6m plus a equals 0. Minus the 8. M squared plus 6m equals negative 8. I'm going to go ahead and erase this part here. I have more space. I'm going to take this 6 divided by 2 and square it. That gives me 9. I'm going to add the 9 to both sides. Plus 9, then negative 8, plus 9. So now this side becomes a perfect square trinomial, right? And this is 1. Negative 8 plus 9 is 1. So from here is that I do the square root. Okay, so I'm going to square both sides. So I'm left with m plus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 1, which is 1. So then let's just erase that, sorry. So then I minus the 3. So the m equals negative 3 plus or minus this, sorry, no square root. We already did the square root. Plus or minus 1. So then m equals negative 3 plus 1 is negative 2. And then negative 3 minus 1 is negative 4. If you notice, are these two answers. So for this example, we could use two different methods. If you think about it, the first part we did factoring. So now all of the quadratics will be factorable. The second part, we started with completing the square, and then we solve it by the square root method. It's a great example. Okay, let's see another example here. Now again, we are solving the quadratics, and we're doing everything that we have learned in order to solve it, and all the methods that we have learned in order to solve it. So looking at this, if I am solving for m, the first thing I want to do is distribute the m. Oops. I'm going to go ahead and rewrite it. Okay, I'm going to distribute that m. So then this is m squared plus 10m equals 2. Now, you have a choice. Which are the methods? Well, let's first make it a quadratic by making it equal to 0. Okay, so this is m squared plus 10m minus 2 equals 0. So, is it factorable? Does it factor? Let's check that. Factors of 2 that will subtract to 10 is not factorable. Can I use that? Well, it's not in the format of the square root property, because for square root, you want it to look something like that. Well, it's not in that format, so definitely that's a no. So we're going to do completing the square. Complete the square. Okay, so I'm going to add the 2. I'm going to put it back to how it was. Okay, now I'm going to take the 10 divided by 2 squared. That gives me 25. Then I'm going to take that 25 and add it to both the left and the right side of the equation. So that is 27. So now remember, the left side of the equation becomes a perfect square trinomial. So the answer is m plus 5 squared equals 27. Now, remember, factors of 25 that add to 10 is 5. So now I need to solve it using the square root property or method. Sometimes I call it like that. M plus 5 equals plus or minus. Cannot forget my plus or minus. Extremely important. Now I'm going to minus the 5 to both sides. So then that gives me m equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 27. And that's my answer right there. Because the question doesn't specify where it wants it as a decimal or to round or any of that. Just saying that m equals negative 5 plus or minus square root of 27 is fine. You are able to simplify 27 because you have square root of 9 and square root of 3. So you can rewrite it as m equals negative 5 plus or minus 3 square root of 3. It's more simplified, but still can do more after that. Let's see if we have another example. No, that's it. So these are the review examples covering a little bit of factoring, using the square root method to solve quadratics and completing the square.